Hello everyone, I'm Eric with Constant Diversion back again, and today we're going to talk briefly about the slow rise of video games being released like television shows, with each new entry being a new season, and each new season being a new game, with periodic releases referred to as episodes, and specifically on how these games are being reviewed by popular media. Let's dive in.
Yeah, have fun with that.
Mainly due to the rise of Telltale video games releasing their products as seasons, we're seeing more and more companies taking up the trend, with big-time publishers like Capcom and their Resident Evil series, and indie developers producing games like Kentucky Route Zero. And more often, we see reviewers drop the ball on exactly how to handle such a process. I should probably start with a disclaimer here. I do not hate video game reviewers. Quite the contrary, actually. In fact, I have many of them I admire. For the most part, those that I do exist on YouTube and various other independent outlets. Not all of them, but most. And I understand that many on the mainstream are fighting an uphill battle when reviewing a AAA title with a ravenous fan base chomping at the bit to tear them apart in the comments section. But more on that in a later video. For now, I'm just speaking on the process of reviewing serialized content before you can look at the entire game as a whole. For instance, you may look back more fondly on Telltale's Walking Dead Season 1. It had fantastic characters, heart-wrenching decisions, and a tearjerker of an ending that was one of the more memorable conclusions of recent years. Season 1 was about the balancing act of Lee trying to keep Clementine protected from the horrors of the world they now inhabit, but all the while trying to retain some semblance of the childhood she deserves, but will no longer have. Season 2 was the antithesis of that, and it got flack for it. A lot of flack, comparatively. Most people seem to outright hate the game for the direction it took in its follow-up season, and I think most of this was facilitated by the way we review serialized games. If we look at episode 1 and like it, then hate episode 2, then think 3 is okay, and so on, we're not actually judging the game, we're judging its chapters, we're not looking at the story the game was trying to tell as a whole. If we didn't do that, if we looked at Season 2 of Walking Dead as the whole, we'd realize that it being the antithesis of Season 1 was, well, the entire point. The first game was about a group of survivors trying to work together to survive and adapt in a world gone to hell. Season 2 was about a group that should actually never be together under any circumstances. It takes everything we learned about survival and unconditional compassion for those more helpless in Season 1 and completely flips it on its head. Clementine is older, and as she gets older, so does the normalcy of the world she lives in. People have learned not to trust each other, learned not to know each other, and have learned that maybe relying on a group isn't necessarily preferable to going it alone, which was essentially what the game was about by the end.
It's Carver. Now he's fucking Bill.
If you take a glance at many of the reactions of fans on Walking Dead Season 2, you're going to find that many of them didn't prefer it. The majority, in fact. The reasons usually cited are because they found the characters way less interesting, way less likable, and just way bigger douchebags. Opinions that were facilitated by frustrated reviewers taking each course individually rather than taking in the whole meal. All the while never considering that their own opinions found within their own copy may have been intentional, maybe even the point of the entire season. These characters are douchebags and backstabbers, and Clementine would be so much better off without them, so she leaves them behind, naturally, in an ending that actually stuck with me more so than did the previous season. The reason being because the game took the time to lay the groundwork for the ending instead of falling back on a tired, cliched zombie ending. This was different, and the way Telltale pulled it off felt more nuanced and less on the rail. I mean, think about it. What other media do we do this in? Do we hit the pause button during the first 40 minutes of 2001: A Space Odyssey and write it a review? Assign it a score? Well before the HAL 9000 even makes an appearance? Or do we review the chapters in books and by the end, based on the mean of the reviews that came prior, assign The Great Gatsby a B-? That's an absurd way of doing things. It makes no sense. Listen, I understand the reviews of each episode serve these games as advertisements for the entire package, but even with that love-hate relationship, I can't help but feel there's something wrong here. And I know that we review television episodes much the same way, but even that's not nearly the same. They exist as parts of parts of parts. They may last years, and when they're out, they're often released weekly. And many of these shows are episodic in nature, meaning that the given circumstances are the same. The Simpsons are always sitting on the couch at the beginning, then they have their adventure, then they return to the couch, then they do it again. Such a medium plays by a completely different set of rules, and even if they don't, we don't pay for the individual episodes or seasons before we've seen the content. When you buy a video game season, more often than not, you have not experienced the content within. This isn't typically the case with any other serialized media. And as this type of episodic reviewing becomes the standard, it may affect the way we experience these episodes in the future, which is a shame. How will what Telltale might have tried to do in Walking Dead Season 3 change because of how these reviews are done? Probably not for the better, but only time will tell.